Hi everybody, this is Jake, Nadia, Buddy, and Sedona, and today we're going to be talking about Enola Holmes 2, the new Netflix special movie that came out recently. I really like the first one. I thought it was fun and cute, and you are a huge fan of it. You've seen it a lot of times, so you were really excited to see this, and I like Millie Bobby Brown and Henry Cavill, so I was looking forward to it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this.
No, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it.
Okay, I didn't really like it.
I could tell.
Yeah.
What would you rate it?
5.
Whoa, that's pretty good for you. I thought you'd rate it like a 4 or 3.
Yeah, we'll see after I talk about it. Probably like a low 5, maybe high 4. It just...
Hey, you said 5.
Okay. It just... I thought that the story was really convoluted and there were certain things that felt like very forced, almost as if they were studio forced, like Marvel cameos and like setting up an extended Sherlock universe. And what I liked about the original is that it was really just about Enola Holmes. Like Sherlock was really a tiny part of that movie. And this felt like it just was trying to do too much, and the story was just not, it wasn't as fun or exciting. There were moments, there were stuff I liked. I liked certain elements to the romance, certain elements to the, I guess, real life story that it has to do with, but so much of it was just way too convoluted. Like I literally was like, I don't understand
what's going on.
What's going on? Like the first one, once the reveals came, it was like, okay, it makes sense. And I kind of like Sherlock Holmes stories to be like that. Like once you look at it through a lens of deduction and logic, you're able to go, okay, I could have figured it out if I was looking close enough. For this, it was very much along the lines of there's a super genius behind the scenes making everything come together, and it felt really lame, and it wasn't a totally satisfying story. There were other parts that I liked, but it just was a huge mess, I thought. And also, I don't know why, I just thought the directing and the editing, especially the editing, was really overdone and felt really, really weak and just kind of not as focused as the first one. How do you feel?
I have 2 ratings for this. There's the first half rating, and there's the second half rating. And I don't want to give an overall rating because I felt like almost like 2 different films for me a little bit.
Okay.
So first part, 6 out of 10.
Okay.
Second part, 8
like
out of 10.
Like the second half of the movie?
Yeah. Second half of the movie, 8 out of 10.
I thought it got so much worse in the second half.
Wow, I thought it got so much better.
Well, I guess parts of it got better, but the actual mystery was just so convoluted. It didn't make any sense to me. It
was a mystery and a mystery. And I think that's why Sherlock was in there and the reason why I think it felt convoluted was because, this is non-spoiler section, but there's 2 mysteries, one for Sherlock and one for Enola.
Yeah, but there really wasn't another story for Sherlock. There were certain suggestions about things, but there was no like mystery for us to solve. It was just Sherlock sitting in front
spoiler?
No, it was just there was Sherlock just sitting in front of like a board, just like going, let me use my brain to think hard about this. And then it somehow tied into the rest of the story. But, okay, maybe I think we're changing roles here because I feel like I want to get into spoilers before you.
Yeah, maybe. I was about to say, like, what do you...
Because the movie starts out just kind of like the first one, just kind of like, well, she's continuing on with her detective agency, and she gets a clue, and she starts following stuff.
This is a non-spoiler section.
I know, this is non-spoilers. And that was fine, but then it started to... The story just didn't make sense.
I don't know why you thought I think that, because I thought it made perfect sense. I thought the beginning was just like lacking in action a little bit more, which is why I rated it lower.
Wait, what do you mean? Just because it lacked in action means that it was worse?
The first movie came out, it was very much like action oriented from the start. There was like...
Yeah, but why are you rating it lower just because it had... Was there something else about it that you didn't like? Or was it just because there was less action?
Yeah, I felt like the story was not picking up in the right pace. Like it was moving along too slow. Yeah. That's what I mean by lacking action.
It didn't
felt
have much
like it was
momentum
lacking excitement to keep me... I feel like if I hadn't watched the first film, and if I wasn't a fan of the first film, then I probably wouldn't have paid either as much attention, or maybe I would have we would have probably conversated as like a background film, or we would have turned off and watched something else. Well, yeah. I think the reason why we kept moving was because we both liked, in our own ways, the first film. And I really liked the first film. So, but the second part of the film, I felt like picked up. I don't know why you got confused, which we can kind of explore in the spoiler section, I believe. It was coming together very nicely. I thought it had a good pace, and I thought that the mystery within a mystery, like the convolutedness, is what kind of made it a little bit more interesting for me, because it was kind of like, oh, just when you think you figured it out, there's something else going on. And I had like what I love about these types of films is that you kind of have your prediction of who done it, kind of like Knives Out. And I was wrong. And it's nice to be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but what's great about a whodunit is that it should be like there's setup to how it makes sense and how it can work. Like you should be able to figure it out if you had all the clues.
But we did. But it shows you how we had all the clues, right? It gives you the clues. We just didn't figure it out so that's why it has a lot of flashback scenes when she does figure it out, because it's like, oh, wait, oh yeah, and this and this and this and this. And that's basically the whole premise of whodunit is like, when you look back at it, the clues are so subtle. It's not going to be big clues where it's going to be like, I'm the one, I'm the killer. It's just like these kind of movies are interesting because when you look back at it, there's subtle hints and clues. And just when you think you figured it out, you miss something that was very essential. And I think that the whole time, if you rewatch it, what the main characters were saying and the different characters leading up to it, it's very, oh yeah, of course, when you like piece all these little subtle hints together, it's obvious who the killer is. But I think that some of my criticism, you're like acting like me now. I feel like some of my criticism is that I thought that the main character, Enola Holmes, just said things out loud for the audience.
That's right. Yes, the exposition was just endless. And it wasn't even like, it was just like explaining what the things are without us trying to figure it out on our own.
Exposition, though. I'm not, because that's the part of like the whole franchise that like she does talk to the camera and she breaks the fourth wall as if like she's talking to us as characters. I'm talking about like when she's like talking to a person who ends up being corrupted, and then she's like calling this person out, in front of them when she's in like a dire situation, and which I can get into in the spoiler section. Then I'm like, wait, like that's not a very smart thing to do or whatever. It's just like she would say things to keep the plot moving. Go ahead, honey. Go ahead. Why don't you let it out?
It was just so poorly like constructed, I think. It just was not, it just felt like they were like, well, we need to have this, we need to have this, we need to have this, and then we got to string it together somehow, and we got to put clues in there, and like the majority of them figuring it out was just sheer luck and just randomness, and then people just revealing things and them justifying their discoveries later on. It just was so frustrating. Like there were scenes that were fine, that worked well, but a lot of the scenes were just like really poorly edited. The action wasn't that strong. I kind of hate it.
Oh my God.
Like the first one was like good because it like was simple and it had the story kind of tight.
They made it too complex, is what you're saying.
Not only did they make it too complex, but they were trying to like expand it to be like the MCU of Sherlock movies. And it was just, but that's not even the biggest problem, because just from like a scene by scene, from like investigating from moment to moment, was just, there was so little momentum. It felt like so obvious. And I get that it's aimed towards maybe younger audiences, but I feel like younger audiences would probably find the first half of this movie just so completely boring.
I do agree that there are some pieces of the solving the mystery where I feel like it could have been done better to give Enola more credit about her being a detective and solving these mysteries instead of her just stumbling upon the answers.
Yes.
And I did notice that. I also noticed that in the first one, and I think it's more so like the stylistic. I would say like that probably the reason why they're doing it that way, because I thought that they did that with the first one too, and I wasn't a big fan of that kind of style, was because they wanted to make it a little bit more realistic in that sense. But it did in some ways make it seem like Sherlock was more competent than Enola. I think undermines some aspects of the message. But at the same time, there are other instances where Enola, the message of the film that I know is Enola doesn't need to, she can do bad all by herself kind of thing, right? And then so I do feel like it puts that across, especially as the way that it ended. I think it's kind of the message of the movie comes across very well that like she can stand up on her own and she doesn't need to be guarded, just because she's a girl and such things. And I think it's more so the bigger aspect of like going against the grain of like a girl who defies expectation of society and such things, I thought it'd be more fun if Mycroft was like also in the film, because he's so opposite from Sherlock. And
Yeah, I don't think he'd add anything here.
You don't think? I thought like, well,
he's already playing against Enola.
I don't like I don't like how he's portrayed in the first film, to be honest. I liked him more in like the Benedict Cumberbatch, like the characterization of him more there. Yeah, I thought like if we could have that version, the show's version of him, I thought it would be fun. I feel like you're ready for a spoiler section.
I hate this movie. I'm ready to bring it down to a 4. Like it just,
okay.
The more I think about it, like, and especially because it's like it doesn't work. I felt like it was just really lazy storytelling.
Hold on,
and I thought it was trying to say an important message, about like unionizing and like worker struggle and women's rights at the end. And it just felt like, what does this have to do also with the overarching? And then we'll get into spoilers. Let's just get into spoilers. This movie is.
Why don't you just talk? Just let it out and let out everything. We're in the spoiler section, and I have less to say apparently than you.
So, and
I know how this feels. So
I understand that this isn't. I'm not the like intended audience maybe for this movie, but I felt like I enjoyed the first one enough because it was fun. It had like a nice story, and it was mostly about like a fish out of water thing where Enola is like experiencing the big city, having to learn how to survive, and she's much braver and smarter than most people give her credit for. This movie is more of like a traditional Sherlock Holmes story type of structure, from the beginning where, she's kind of investigating this missing girl who was working at this matchstick factory. And, it becomes kind of clear like, okay, well, there's some kind of, what corporate, bullshit going on here. And they're clearly forecasting like, okay, these girls are getting sick because there's probably something going on with the work situation in the factory. Okay, fine, great. This is the story. This is what we're going to investigate. Let's get on the road. Through situations, Sherlock is involved, and it becomes bigger than this. It becomes bigger than that. And he's like on his own thing, trying to figure stuff out. It's always like a bigger conspiracy. And like, okay, fine. But also it really wasn't. Like there really was just like another person, which we'll get into as Moriarty. Like the second, and one of my issues when movies will kind of just make references because the audience knows what it is. It's like that big reveal. It's like played as a reveal when Sherlock is like deciphering some code on his wall, which means nothing to the audience. He's deciphering it, and then it spells out to Moriarty. And it's like, okay, what does that mean to the story? What does that mean to anything except that we know, like, ooh, that's his arch nemesis, And it just felt very comic booky, like, oh, there's Spider-Man, like we know that character from the comics, and I guess that's fine, but it ended up playing so little into the overarching story. And I didn't understand why. Like, there are some nice reversals, like the girl that she's trying to find ends up trying to like reveal this information about this matchstick factory and how the phosphorus is like poisoning these girls and they're working in unsafe conditions. But why is she going through these convoluted means to like write this poem that in this piece of music that ends up becoming a map so that they can find the documents so that she can then tell Tewkesbury and they can try to reform this, when it's like Tewkesbury is very open to receiving this information. I don't know why they didn't go to him directly, and instead they had to use Enola to get through these channels. That it felt like it just felt like.
What do you mean? How did they use Enola to get through this channel?
Because
like, what do you mean by that?
Because they reach out to Enola and they're like. They get her involved so that they can end up, because they want to reveal the information to Tewkesbury. But it's like, what is the point of all of that?
The sister went to Enola, not them. They wanted to go to Tewkesbury.
But what's with the map, with the piece of music that ended up being a map of where the documents were?
That's where they had hidden. So I think what they were going to do is they were going to give it to Tewkesbury so that he can find the documents, because he wanted them to expose it. They needed someone powerful. I think it was just coincidental. They didn't want Enola's help. I think that's why the boyfriend William, who passed away, was like, you're gonna ruin things when Enola discovers or suspects him, because they weren't trying to go through Enola. I don't think you understood that one. They were like two things happening at once. It just so happens that Enola had direct access to her lover, who ends up being like a powerful guy that these other people are trying to reach.
Yeah, I guess, but there's so much like chance and luck into the investigation.
That's why in the beginning you would see the other girl, the roommate of the little girl's sister, who is like, oh, I don't want your help, we don't need you, because they had an intentional plan. Like, the sister disappeared on purpose, and that's why they didn't want help, because trying to expose something, she was in disguise, she was undercover. And then if Nola was going to come and try to solve the mystery, they were too afraid that it was going to ruin it, because they were intentionally trying to expose the factory that they were working in. And that's why they were resistant, because they couldn't trust Enola, because it's like, the girl like you, because thinks she's like upper class, she's dressed well, she doesn't understand the conditions of these women. Like, William, he wanted this exposed. He didn't want to just run away. He wanted to be like, okay, these girls matter with the other girl. It's like, okay, these girls matter. Like, we want to make sure we expose this. We need someone powerful. And that's why he enlisted the help of Tewksbury. I think if they had known that Enola was trying to help, really well connected to this guy, then I don't think these channels would have been necessary to do, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. I think
that's why I made it convoluted for you, because like, Sherlock's nemesis ends up being the secretary.
Well, that's the whole thing. That was just like, because I could have accepted probably like
three
other
things
stuff
came together.
But it was just like, what did Moriarty, like, it was just like tacked on. It was just like, well, we have to have Moriarty. It's like, no, actually, this super evil person behind this isn't this company that's just like trying to be shitty and do profits. But no, there's actually the secretary is secretly evil. It's just like, what is this trying to say? Like, what is the point of having that even? I
think they were trying to like
they're trying to set up like sequels.
For Sherlock, and then because at the end of the movie, the Sherlock has his roommate, and
Dr.
his
Watson, which they did as like a mid-credit like tease for like Spider-Man, you know.
Like, it's like Sherlock is going to have his own movie, basically, is what they're trying to say, I think. And
I don't think so, but
or Enola 3 like is going to have more of that. But either way, I think they're setting up teaser into something else. I think it is very much like MCU kind of way.
But what did you think about, like, what did Moriarty have to do? Like, can you explain to me like what the accounts that Sherlock was investigating, and what did she have to do with this plot? Can you explain that?
I think she was trying to extort money. Like, I agree that part of the message wasn't clear, but I think what I got from it was that she was trying to extort money from her boss, part of this bigger scheme.
What scheme?
Of just like, I guess,
being evil.
It wasn't very clear. I'm sure if I Googled it and then researched it, there's someone who's like actually can explain that part. But I didn't want to do that, because I think like being confused about it does like show the merit of the movie, is that it wasn't very clear, that aspect. Everything else was clear, though.
I think it was still more complicated than it needed to be, and it wasn't totally clear. And I think they could have spent more time on these threads, like this romance that was doomed because they were trying to, reveal information about this factory. That's interesting, and I wish they spent more time on their romance, on that connection, of these other characters. Instead of like suddenly having this Moriarty thing tacked on. And like, even in the story, it felt like they didn't know, like they kind of acknowledged like, okay, this doesn't really make sense, because then when the evil factory owner is like, arrest her, the police officer is like, on what charges? He's like, extortion. And then it's that's like to us funny, because I get it, but it's like the point is like, it felt like they were trying to like tape over like, oh, we'll make this a funny moment because it's so confusing anyways.
I do agree that part was a little convoluted. I don't think that like the rest of the other parts were convoluted, but I do love the part at the end where Enola and the two girls, they make noises. They kind of like fight for a unionship because the harmful chemicals is what's killing the girls, and then ends up in the paper and such things. And I didn't know that was based on a true event until it was shown later after in the credit. And I thought that was really powerful because I think like Enola Holmes is like a very feminist, very like going against the grain that society has otherwise put on women. I guess my criticism, you said a lot, so I won't cover as much because I think you covered a lot of the criticism. But I do think that like one criticism that I don't think you got into was that, you know how I said I would rate it 2 different ratings, right? The reason why I felt like it was 2 parts of the film, even though it's the same film and it is overarching and connected, was that because of the first film, when it ends, it's, you know, it's like Enola is like, just because my name backwards is, I'm paraphrasing, but like because her name basically is alone backwards, she says that she knows that her mom never meant for her to be alone. And then there's a realization there, like, you know what, just because I'm a badass doesn't mean that I have to be alone in my life. Like, I don't need to, you know what I mean? I can be independent and also have partnership with people. Felt like it was kind of repetitive of that message, the first part of the film. And then the second part of the film, I felt like is when that message really gets carried over. The first part, I kind of felt like, oh yeah, forget that I like said I learned this lesson in the beginning of the film. It's kind of like she didn't really learn it. Yeah, I felt like that message was repetitive. Yeah. I kind of wish it took over from like her understanding that. I feel like he did a little bit more. And I also think it's a little bit more of a teenager kind of scenes where she's like stalking the boyfriend, you know, and not telling him that like she loves him and stuff, and he's like frustrated with her and things. And I think that was more done for comedic effect as well.
Yeah.
But I that's why I like had to give it a couple of different ratings because it felt a little repetitive for me. I would say the other thing that I liked about the film, more of her mom in there. I think it's interesting in the film itself how
but the thing is, I feel like the mom and her like league of like revolutionary women fighting for women's rights, but they're always like behind the scenes, you know, doing terrorist activity or whatever, you know. It just feels like in these movies, she's just kind of like a get out of jail free card. Literally in this movie, she's just like, well, good thing she's there to just get her out of jail for free. And it's just kind of like, always just kind of like, well, there's this thing that'll just like help the story out if it needs it, you know.
I don't think it's like necessarily, I think it's just like goes with the idea of like, if you want to be heard, you got to make some noise.
Yeah,
I think it's like her getting out of the jail. Like, obviously she wouldn't be, I think it shows a little bit more realistic sense in the movie universe, because it's like, obviously she's not going to climb the wall and then be able to take down like 13, 14 prisoners all by herself. Like, the overarching theme of the first film is that you can like, people who do great things aren't alone. They do it in a team. They do it in a partnership. They nothing is ever accomplished alone. Like, there's like, if you want to go far, go together, you know? And I think it kind of hones in that situation. What I liked about that film, that aspect, is that her mom, like 2 women save her instead of like Sherlock saving, because Sherlock is a little bit more of a guardian. You're very naive, and she is in a lot of aspects, but he's very doubtful, like, and a protector. And by the end of the film, I think he learns like, you know, she's fine despite me. Like, at the end, she has a paper that says, you know, I'll solve mystery, pay me whatever you can. Right? Whereas Sherlock, he has very high-end clients, so I think it differentiates her from him.
Yeah, I mean,
she's
I think
finding the
clear.
own path, and I think I like that aspect of the film as well.
Yeah, I like those things too. I wish it were a little more subtle with, you know, how.
Of course, she can afford to do that because she's, you know, going to be marrying, I'm sure, like the richest man of that time, basically. One of them, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I do like that instead of taking this path, like, well, we need this like moderate reformer to kind of like go in, and he mentions, Tewksbury mentions how like, oh, he's always having a compromise and it's frustrating, yada yada. And I do like how it kind of goes to like, oh, the women end up striking, you know, and I like how they did that. I wish it was a little more subtle, but you know, I'm glad that they focused on that and the messaging. I think the messaging was generally positive, and I don't have an issue. I don't have an issue with the message of the film or like the political statements it's trying to make. I think those are all fantastic, but I think that the way it's done is it's just really not the best kind of storytelling. I think it just felt very obnoxious and heavy-handed. At some point it just felt like superhero movie, like when they break her out of prison and then the three of them just fight all those cops, just like boom, 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 and just
I think that's the point.
Like, epic fighting superhero movie.
But that's the point of like even the first film is like it is a superhero film in its own right without superpowers. It's like these women who stood up at a time when they were told to like just sit down, they are superheroes. It is a little bit over exaggerated for that effect to kind of like really empower. And I think just like they made the noise in the factory, I think the message of the movie is to inspire people. Actually just like, don't be afraid to make noise kind of thing. You hate it, don't you? It's like a 3. I can tell it's like a 3 for you. It's like just be honest. Is it a 3?
I like what it wants to say and what it's trying to do, but it felt insincere in a lot of ways and really. Yeah, it's a 4. It's a 4.
It was a 5 before. Now it's a 4.
Yeah.
Low 4?
No, it's just a 4. It's
what
fine.
Is a 4?
It's fine.
Low 4, mid 4.
The other one was better.
I get what you're saying, and I honestly think that if I wasn't such a big fan of the first film, I do think that like I would. I think I also understood the plot points a lot better than you did. Mm-hmm. Because I've watched the first film like 10 times. So I think I know the rhythm.
Well, that's the thing. It felt like it was relying on a familiar rhythm with a lot of familiar cliches. Like, I'm just thinking about like the fast editing. It just kind of relies on this fast editing to kind of keep you going. And then like even scenes where it was unnecessary to have like the Rube Goldberg editing, cutting back to like her mom. And like doing the Rube Goldberg machine is like all things have consequences or whatever, and it just ended up being like a clever. It ended up becoming like a clever. They did it like 3 times during like a fight scene where it's like she's trying to figure things out, even when it wasn't necessary. Like I get using that editing style at the climax of the movie because it has something to do with landing on the ropes and levers, and David Thewlis gets like his crotch impaled by a hook and flies up into the air. Like that kind of work. That's kind of Rube Goldberg-esque. But that scene where she's just hanging from the rafters and it's like Rube Goldberg machine, but she just sees like a kid, like a boy through a window and just trades clothes with him. Like I don't get how that's like that editing was just trying to be flashy in order to just like keep up audience retention.
A funny aspect because in the first film what she does is she gives money to people in the streets or whoever to whenever she wants to be a boy in disguise. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what it was referencing, and this is why like I understood it because I watched the first film, and I think you're right. It does like rely on a rhythm, and I think that's why I liked it more than you. Because if you had watched the first film like as many times as I did, I think you would have gotten it a lot more because it's kind of like familiarity in that sense. But at the same time, I do agree with you in a lot of aspects. There's things that were repetitive. I mean, I even mentioned that, right? I really hope there's a third one.
No, I'll watch it with you.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you'll want me to, though.
I don't think I want you to.
All right. Well,
thank you so much for watching. And let us know what your thoughts are and what we should watch next. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.
Talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.